Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. While the decision win over Hughie Fury is barely in the rear view, barely behind us, it certainly throws up a lot of food for thought about what is next for Joseph Parker. Have we seen the best of Joseph Parker? Who should he fight next? And will that fight be against Dillian Whyte, who has now again called out Joseph Parker? So just on the Fury win, I've actually gone back and watched the fight again without sound, and I do still have it as a close fight. I rescored round 3 for Parker, which gave me 6 rounds for Parker, 5 for Fury, and a really even 4th round. As we know, 2 of the judges actually scored 10 rounds for Parker, which I still feel is a little bit wide. But clearly those 2 judges punished Fury for running all night and being too negative. And I'm certainly not mad at the result. In fact, it's the opposite. I'm glad Parker has the belt. I've made it no secret that I am a Joseph Parker fan. But it doesn't mean that I can't think it was a close fight, because I've certainly been taking a lot of heat in the comment section of the last video. But importantly for Parker, he retains the belt and his O, and he remains a valuable commodity on the heavyweight scene. He now has the opportunity to continue building his profile overseas, especially in the UK if that's where he so chooses. So we actually did know that the Fury fight, it was going to be an awkward one. Chasing down someone who's running the London Marathon, as one commentator in my post-fight review put it, is difficult. I mean, Parker did have a solid game plan, but it was hard to execute, and he did look a bit patchy at times. But a big reason for that is Fury, who was running all over the place and quite effectively. There's certainly a range of views on just how good a performance it was from Parker, but I know a lot of non-Joseph Parker fans, from what I've been able to gauge on social media and elsewhere, they still aren't convinced by him, and they've also seen similar, well maybe not scratchy, but they've seen close fights or performances what didn't sort of meet their expectations. So close fight against Ruiz, Kajanu, people thought he should put him away, and now Fury. I mean, Parker was saying he was going to knock him out, and he never looked like knocking him out, but I mean, Fury was a big part of that, and he did prove he had a good chin. So it must be said that Fury has a good chin. Certainly the last 2, well, they have proved stylistically to be a bit of a stinker in terms of the action. We didn't really know that that would be the case with Kajanu because we didn't really know who he was. He was a bit of an obscure opponent. People were saying, Res Van who? But we knew that Fury might make Parker look bad, even if he did win. And Sir Bob Jones, even though people say he's salty Bob Jones, he did point this out. So full credit for Bob for seeing that. Parker's profile, it certainly would have lifted somewhat in the UK and elsewhere after this fight. But I'm sure it's not exactly the statement performance that he was looking to make. He was promising a KO, and a lot of fans were holding him to that and expecting it. And some fans wanted to see something like that just to prove that he's a viable future opponent for Anthony Joshua. But Fury frustrating him with the movement and whatnot, that sort of put paid to that, and it hasn't really done him any favours on that front. But he does have a good opportunity right now and a chance to select an opponent in a voluntary defence. I mean, Parker's promoter, Duco Events, has the opportunity to hand-pick an opponent that's a good style matchup for Parker. So at the top of my list would be Dillian Whyte, and for quite a few reasons actually. So Whyte is promoted by Matchroom promoter Eddie Hearn, who is making the biggest fights at heavyweight right now, and he is able to generate the biggest paydays out there right now at heavyweight. We already know that there is a relationship between Duco's David Higgins and Hearn, with the pair meeting in July, and Eddie Hearn stated that if Parker won, he would be trying to match Parker with Dillian Whyte or Tony Bellew. Hearn even said he would be sending Higgins offers. So it's not like there hasn't been contact, we just probably haven't been privy to it. So Duco is on the record as actually saying, boxing is a business. It's about making as much money as possible for the least amount of damage and brain cells being gone. So they're going to look after their fighter, Joseph Parker, in a business sense. So Whyte makes a lot of sense in that regard. So while Higgins has hinted at some beef with Hearn this week, see the card on screen, that'll take you to some comments that he made at a press conference where he seemingly was trying to separate himself and create a bit of distance. They'll no doubt deal with Hearn in a heartbeat if it makes the most business sense. I mean, stylistically for me, it's a great fight for Parker, and arguably for Whyte too. With both fighters, they like to come forward, they like to throw punches. And Parker has looked his best when people have been in front of him and willingly trading with him. A lot of fans know Parker can do damage in close quarters, as can Whyte. So from a sheer entertainment point of view, it's going to be a great fight. And in the eyes of fans, it's a legitimate fight, a fight they want to see. Most fans would be happy to see a Whyte-Parker clash, I think. I'm sure a number of fans would see it as a 50-50 fight for whatever reason. It would give Whyte a title shot, which he's desperate for, we know that, and Parker the chance to prove himself to the UK audience, keep building his brand. And remember, if he takes out Dillian Whyte on his home turf, it would be a great scalp for Parker. And guess what? Surprise, surprise. Dillian Whyte has again tweeted he wants that work against Parker. See on screen. Calling him Runbish and imploring Eddie Hearn to make the fight. So we know he's meant to be saying rubbish, but I just thought I'd run that Runbish because that sounds quite funny. But let's see where this goes. And remember, Hearn has already said that the path to Anthony Joshua to a fight with AJ is through either Whyte or Tony Bellew. That if he took out Fury and if he took out a Dillian Whyte or a Tony Bellew, then that makes an Anthony Joshua fight a necessity. So if you look at it from that standpoint, you know, the way and, you know, the road to Joshua, which is an even bigger payday, you get through Whyte, you're halfway there. And Parker has actually spoken about, you know, he's interested in a fight with Whyte, but also he said he's interested in a fight with Bellew, more so than Whyte. So that's also a possibility. And also for some of the reasons that I've also already outlined. But as has been pointed out, Hearn would have to get Bellew ranked in the WBO top 15. So I'll put that up on screen here. That's not impossible, because we all know how these sanctioning bodies work. But it would likely be 2018 before a fight between Tony Bellew and Joseph Parker could occur. Whereas if they wanted this year, it's still possible to get a Dillian Whyte and Joseph Parker fight. Then throw in David Haye to the mix as well. So Haye has cultivated a relationship with Parker and his team during the Fury fight build-up. So there's probably a number of reasons. I mean, Haye is a pretty shrewd businessman. But a Haye fight on the surface, based off the Bellew fight, is probably something that Duco would be interested in. And I'm sure the money would be there. It would generate big dollars. So I'm sure there'd be something that they'd be willing to consider. But like Bellew, Haye would also have to get ranked. I mean, other possibilities could include Jarrell Miller. I think he would fancy his chances of a fight with Parker and what he might be able to do to him. But similarly, I think Parker would probably think, I can hurt Miller. There were some moments in that fight with Gerald Washington where Miller looked hurt. And Washington isn't a noted puncher. So it did raise questions for me about Miller's chin. You could also make a case from the rankings, up on screen again, for an Andy Ruiz matchup. But I'm sure Team Parker would never take that as a voluntary. Alexander Povetkin, you know, that would be a good payday, but it's a massively risky fight. Probably for the same reason as Ruiz, you know, it's high risk, so unlikely to take that. Christian Hammer, he probably becomes the mandatory. So you'd probably want to let that happen if you were Team Parker, because he then becomes the opponent after your voluntary, and you'd fancy Parker in that fight. Luis Ortiz and Kubrat Pulev, well, they're tied up, so that's not happening. And then again, Dominic Breazeale, that could happen at a stretch. But would you really want to create Anthony Joshua comparisons? Because people would. That'd be one of the first things they would do. And if Breazeale took Parker to a decision, people would be like, well, Parker hasn't clearly got any power, yada yada, that sort of thing. The rest, well, judging by the list, you can make up your own mind here. I think they're okay fights, but I don't think that the money would be there. and it wouldn't be there for Duco and Parker. And that's what they want to do. They want to generate decent money, get a good win, get a good paycheck, and then even if you lose, you still get the good paycheck. So I come back to Dillian Whyte. I think that's the obvious choice here. If they're willing to offer Wilder somewhere over $4 million, and I believe that was US dollars, then I'm sure Parker's team, they're going to be pushing for something similar, for a similar sort of deal. But I guess the rub here is that, unlike when Charles Martin fought Anthony Joshua, Joseph Parker is not a Charles Martin type. So it's not like he's, trying to sell the belt, which Martin has been accused of. Another issue that comes up every time that Parker looks a little scratchy in his wins is the old chestnut, and you probably know where I'm going now, is does he need a new trainer? I think while some of that has been bubbling up after this win, because there's been a number of people who've been commenting on it, and it is an interesting question for sure. And we know that the likes of Abel Sanchez have offered their services, and they'd like to train him, and a whole host of others have as well. I don't think that a change of trainer will happen until after a loss. And even then, Joseph Parker being so loyal, I'm not sure that he would leave Kevin Barry. He keeps developing and he is getting better, and I do think he is getting better, but I don't think he would desert Barry. There is real talent there, and he is a legit heavyweight on the scene, despite what people are saying. I do believe we haven't seen the best of Parker yet either, with some of that coming down to who his opponents have been, what their styles, that sort of thing, the matchup. But clearly hand-picking a style that suits Parker and can make him look good, well, that's a no-brainer for the next fight. So from the top 15 of the rankings on screen again here, who do you feel is the most viable fight, the most bang for buck? So if they're going to pick someone and they want to make a few dollars but make sure that Parker wins, who makes the most sense? And who is a fight that you want to see? Because it's kind of a cluster of all those things that I'm sure will come into play. And Parker and Duco seem intent on setting a third fight for this year, so we could hear some news very, very soon. Okay, that's it from me. Hit like, subscribe, drop a comment. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.